Great. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel discussion on soil sustainability in the media. Many of you, I know, attended our showing of the film Dirt, the movie, last night at the Pacific Film Archives, and today we're very happy to have the co-director, co-writer, and co-producer of the film, Gene Roso, with us for the panel discussion. If you want to learn more about the movie and things associated with it, please go to dirtthemovie.org and you can follow the trajectory of the film and its release in various formats over the course of the year. One of the things that Gene wanted to do while he was visiting the Berkeley campus is use the film as sort of a springboard to try to discuss the issues of connecting scientific research and scientific knowledge with the public consciousness. So this panel discussion brings together a series of a number of people from various areas to talk about this and to try to move some ideas ahead about how we can better connect with the public consciousness. I'll just mention that Dirt, the movie last night, has sort of a three-part component. It sort of covers the way in which humans have traditionally had a connection with the solid earth and the soil. Then it goes into an overview of sort of our present state of disconnect with the earth and the way people have been abusing it. But it ends with a hopeful note about ways in which, in many different avenues and many different areas, where people are once again realizing the importance of soil and its importance to society and to human health, and ends on sort of a positive note that is one of, I think, the things we want to discuss here today in the panel discussion. So the movie, I think, makes the case that brown is the new green, and today we have a group of panelists from a variety of areas that sort of bridge the media and entertainment world with the science world. Again, we have Gene Roso, the director and producer of the film, Garrison Sposito, professor of soil science, who is, actually I should make the formal introduction. Gary is the Betty and Isaac Barshad Chair in Soil Science and a professor of ecosystem sciences here at UC Berkeley, where he also received his doctorate in soil science. He teaches courses in environmental geochemistry, particularly as it relates to soil and water quality. He co-teaches the Introduction to Environmental Studies with the former U.S. Poet Laureate, Robert Haas. From 1996 to 2001, Gary served as the director of the Kearney Foundation of Soil Science, a University of California endowment-supported research program whose mission was soil quality in the California environment. In addition to numerous journal articles, he's the author of several textbooks, as well as the article on soil, which appears in the Encyclopedia Britannica. He's a recipient of several awards and honors, including 4 Distinguished Teaching Awards and the Horton Medal of the American Geophysical Union, awarded annually for outstanding contributions to the geophysical aspects of hydrology. Next on our panel is Nathaniel Johnson, and Nathaniel is a freelance journalist who lives in San Francisco. He's written stories for NPR, The American Life, New York, Outside Magazine, and Harper's. He began his career as a small-town newspaper reporter in southern Idaho, where he covered agriculture and the environment through the lens of local politics. Brian Wright is a professor in the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics. His interests in economics and uncertainty date from his early experiences on his family's sheep station in New South Wales, Australia. He has a bachelor's of agricultural economics from the University of New England in Armidale, attended Harvard University where he received his PhD. He joined the Yale Economics Department and is now a professor here in our own Ag and Resource Economics Department at Berkeley. And then finally, Gene is a longtime Berkeley associate. He received his undergraduate degrees in pre-med and history, later came back to Berkeley to receive his PhD in history, and stayed on to teach film and film theory before launching his own career in both documentary and commercial films. So at this point, I will turn it over to each of the panelists for about a 5 or so minute introduction on their views and in reactions to the film and their ideas about the topic of the panel today.
Hello, okay. Hello. Let me set my timer just to make sure that I don't ramble on. And it's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure certainly to be here on this panel. And just to help put things into perspective, let me read a brief story about one of the Darwin Award nominees, which Professor David Orr, Dean of Earth Sciences at Oberlin, told me. After stopping off for a drink at an illegal bar, a Zimbabwean bus driver found that 20 mental patients he was supposed to be transporting had escaped. Not wanting to admit his incompetence, the driver went to a nearby bus stop and offered everyone waiting there a free ride. He then delivered his passengers to the mental hospital, telling the staff that the patients were very excitable and prone to bizarre fantasies. The deception was not discovered for 3 days. Now, if you're somebody that really cares about the environment, you may have the feeling that you've been hijacked, not only for the past 8 years, but by a number of ways that our society works in relationship to the environment, particularly to soil. And it feels now that we have at least an opening with a different administration that we're sorting out the deceptions and figuring out how we might be able to make things right. And hopefully our film, and not only the film, but the overall project that we set out to do can contribute in some way, some small way, hopefully, to this process. And in the spirit of beginning this film, what I'd like to do is just tell you the story of sort of how the film came into being and what our hopes for the film were, what the limitations of the film as a medium for us also are. We began the film when somebody handed us the book, Dirt, the Ecstatic Skin of the Earth. And it appealed to me as somebody who'd been in not only in history, had a background in history and science. There was a spiritual dimension to that film that interested me. It harked back to the little piece of organic garden that I had down at Cornell and Gilman. And it awoke a lot of things in my own personal approach that I hadn't really been thinking about. And it had turned, it was actually not an easy read, but it turned things around. And my producing partner, we were working on a completely different film, a feature film, a studio narrative film. So can we do something with this? I said, absolutely. And we began to say, well, what can we do with this? Well, we wanted to make a film that was about something people had not thought about. We wanted to make a film that contributed in some important way, more than what we were working on, generally to thinking about the environment in some way. We wanted to make a film that would reach out to an audience beyond the circles that we usually ran into where we already were committed to the environment and to taking action for it. How do you reach beyond that audience that's already there? So we set out to make the film, and we began to look for a means to do it. Given the fact that we had both experience as feature film producers and documentary filmmakers, we sought to combine those skills. And the first attempt that we took on was to tell the story of dirt and humans from dirt's point of view. That is, dirt would have a voice in telling the story, would have the voice. After we go through the panel, I can show you our first attempt at that. We thought it was really great. We thought it worked very well for the length of what I'll show you, but when we tried it for a longer period of time, it didn't allow for bringing up the seriousness of purpose, what we hoped to achieve with the rest of it. So we went on to the form of the film that we showed last night. And as I had mentioned last night, for those of you who were not there, we got into the Sundance Film Festival with a rough cut, which was all over the map. They came back and said, "You're in." We were astonished, and we had to hurry up and make the film, which we delivered within hours of the world premiere there. That film, which is what we showed here, which has worked with audiences, so we know what's working, wasn't really as complete as we had hoped to make it. So we're finishing that film now. But from the beginning, we always looked at this film as only part of an overall process. My experience was make a film, hope it gets in festivals, unless it's somebody that pays you to do it, like television. Get it into festivals, get somebody to distribute your film. If it's a success, and it's going to go out on video, and you'll have further success as it goes forward. That model has completely changed. And it's changed in a more interesting way for those of us who want to use media to somehow contribute to what the discussion is of the environment. First of all, you have access to much more materials than you would. You make a film, 31-year ratio, you use the one, you throw out the 29. Now we can start using other materials as they pertain to other ways of delivering what you would like to say. And again, afterward, there are two short things. There's a 1.5-minute animation that was not in the film, more suitable for kids, and there's a longer piece on Alice Waters in the Edible Schoolyard. Because when in the film, one thing, and it's a limitation, and I mean, I have other self-criticisms of the film as it's turned out in the version we've seen, but a film is a medium that cannot convey the complexity of issues in the way one wants to. So, and any film, it's operating at a different level. However, with a new media approach now, what we're looking at is how the film is a tail that wags a dog of a larger project. And that larger project is an educational thrust of K through 12 through university level and community engagement. And there's specifics to that. In the K through 12, Alice Waters in the Edible Schoolyard is a pretty good example of an approach taken through that form of education. At the university level, it's interesting and trickier. There was an article by Mark Taylor. I don't know if any of you saw that in the Sunday. It was a Sunday. It was the New York Times, and it was end the university as we know it. End the university. No, does it end? End the university as we know it. He had a lot of points to make it, but one of them was abolishing departments to focus on, create problem-focused programs. And he mentioned a number: lifetime, water. So how do you then think about soil as a problem-focused topic which pulls in not only interdisciplinary subjects, but also allows one to use media in that mix? When I began, I did my PhD in the history of gangster movies here. Dwindling was where I hung my hat. And I insisted on having first of all, I had to write a paper justifying in historiography why you could use film at all as a primary resource for history. Now, you don't argue that, but I had to defend that to my department. Second, I said I would really like to make a film as my dissertation. Well, that got things going, and of course they said after some debates, yes, you can, as long as you write a dissertation too. So, which then became a book, but here too, it's really a matter of how do you reach students, and then how do you get the students to participate in that process? How is it that you then start to not only share information, but then you use social networking phenomena that comes out of some real strong informative background within the classroom, and then can go out and communicate to other people. Let me just see where I am here. I'm gone. I'm over. So I'm sorry. I'll cut it off there, and I can show. I'll show you some of the examples of what I was talking about, and we'll revisit in the discussion.
Hello? Yeah, this is on, eh? Okay, good. You can hear me? A little louder? Don't like that. As I watched this movie, which I thought was quite nice, I very much enjoyed your movie. There were several things that resonated with me, some of them from a long time ago. And so I had to do a little internet searching to see, and lo and behold, everything I wanted was there, which I want to mention today. One of them actually was an article, it's very recent, in the journal Environmental Development and Sustainability, which is an article about the signals that we get from societies or civilizations that are about to collapse. It turns out that people study this very seriously, and there are three characteristics, which I'll read to you. First, rapid growth in resource use and pollution. Second, limited resource availability and waste absorption capacity. And third, delayed response by decision makers when these limits have been exceeded. This is called overshoot. Goes on and says, on the local scale, overshoot can be seen in the processes of desertification, mineral or groundwater depletion, poisoning of agricultural soils or forest land by long-lived toxic waste, and rapid extinction of species. On the global scale, overshoot means the breakdown of the great supporting cycles of nature that regulate climate, purify air and water, regenerate biomass, preserve biodiversity, and turn wastes into nutrients. And the article points out that we've got all these signals in our present civilization. In fact, the book from which this quote comes goes on to run economic models that predict the collapse of the present civilization by the end of this century. Paul Hawken, his recent book, Blessed Unrest, also came to mind. The second half of the movie especially resonates with this book about small movements that do big things. But he has some pretty nice things to say about that cycling too, which I thought would be worth quoting. Nature cycles not only information, nature recycles everything. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is thrown away because there is no away. All natural processes are cyclical. Every scrap of matter, atom or molecule, is reused and repurposed into new flows of life. Industrial society behaves like a spoiled child, casting away its unwanted toys in every direction, the only creature that leaves a wake that cannot be recycled by either nature or industry. Hawken, by the way, will be the featured speaker at the CRS graduation on Saturday, the alternative graduation held at the Blake Estate. So I think you can get the points here that soil is one part of this fairly significant breakdown that we're seeing with respect to all the hallmarks of a civilization that is in danger. And it's come before. One of the telling statements in this article points out that there always has been an elite that thought it could ride out the changes because it was in a privileged position or it had a lot of money or both, etc. And what this article says, they were dead wrong. The other thing that resonated strongly with me in seeing the movie actually were two movies that I had seen much, much earlier myself. One of them, in fact, was very, very important. This one, the first one was Elia Kazan's East of Eden. Now, this is a film which ostensibly takes place in the Salinas Valley. Most of it was filmed in Mendocino. In fact, if you know Mendocino, right away you recognize a lot of the houses and all that. I guess they managed to keep the ocean out of the picture. At any rate, there are parts of it that are in Salinas. And there's one scene that, in fact, I was able to find a picture from on the internet, in which the featured actor was a person named James Dean, really not known to the general public at that time. And he plays the part of Cal Trask, who is a very conflicted figure in this film. He's trying to find his mother. He's trying to understand his identity. His father is a lettuce farmer, very religious kind of person, overbearingly religious. But there's this very interesting scene where Cal goes to this lettuce field. You can't see it well in this photo, but there actually are young lettuce plants in rows in this field. And he lies down in the field, and he starts sifting the soil in his hands and thinking about it. And then he lies there. And what he's doing here is he's trying to will these lettuce plants to grow. He's trying to use all the power of his mental ability to do this. Well, after I saw that film, and when I saw this scene, I went right down. I was here a student. I was a freshman at Berkeley. I went right down and I changed my major from architecture to soil science. So, I gave up a 4-year scholarship, which I had in architecture, to do that. And so I had to leave Berkeley. I went back to where my parents lived. They lived on a farm in Arizona, southeast of Phoenix, in a city now called Chandler. And I went to the University of Arizona to complete my soil science major. So if anyone doubts the transformative power of film, I can tell you firsthand that it's really very, very important. And this is a kind of nurturing approach to soil. I mean, it's clear that in this scene, which a lot of people like, they've written about before, and there's also a scene where Cal meets the lady in his life in the film too, Arba. It's also in a lettuce field, and there are lettuce workers and so forth involved. But the soil was the star of this scene. James Dean wasn't a known person at that time to speak of. A few people knew that some kid had been killed in a car wreck before the film came out, but that's all. There was no particular import, except that he was very good and got terrific reviews for his potential in this film. The other film is more recent, although it's still pretty old. It's a film called Novecento by Bernardo Bertolucci. I don't know how many of you have seen this film. The first half is actually worthwhile. Second half, I'm not so sure it's so good. This is a very self-indulgent movie. It's very long. In fact, I think they had to have a trial to determine finally how long it would be when it was released, and so it's a very litigious situation. But this film had 2 very young male stars in it, or actually they weren't quite stars then. Gérard Depardieu, who plays the part of Olmo, and Robert De Niro, who plays the part of Alfredo. But the first part of the film shows them as boys growing up, and they're played by different actors, of course, then, these boys. And the clip I have in mind is actually on the internet. I was quite amazed that it was. If you go to YouTube and you do clip plus Bertolucci plus 1900, you'll come up with one that's called clip plus Bertolucci. And you'll see a kid standing in the middle of a hayfield. And the sound is on only for half of the clip because YouTube has some rules about what you can say in film clips. And so the second half, for a reason it'll become apparent to you in a moment, isn't there, but you can see the whole clip. So these 2 boys are sort of going around being macho kids, and they're challenging one another to various things. And the Olmo character, the Depardieu character, in this film sort of made him as a star, I might say, just like James Dean in East of Eden. He's the one that's more challenging, sort of the country kid, and there's the city kid played by Alfredo. And so they're going back and forth in these challenges, doing all sorts of things, and then suddenly Olmo goes over to in the middle of this field, and he digs a hole in the soil. He digs this hole, and he lays down in front of it. So Alfredo wants to keep up, so he digs a hole too, doesn't know why. And so then Olmo takes the soil and he washes his face with the soil like this all over. So Alfredo washes his face also with the soil just to be on top of it. And then, and this is the important part, and then Olmo humps up over the hole and starts going like this. And Alfredo says, "What are you doing?" And this is why YouTube can't put the sound on. He says in perfect Italian, he says, "I'm screwing the," except he doesn't say screwing, "I'm screwing the earth." And he sits there, and so then Alfredo does the same thing, and the scene moves up, then it moves away, and they're both humping away on this hole in the earth. Now, there's a lot of significance. I mean, there's a whole thing about gender. There's a whole thing about the way the earth is regarded. In the film, it talks about our mother, the earth, and that's maybe the Cal Trask point of view from East of Eden. But, or maybe there's even more subtlety here than I think in Bertolucci's film. But you know, and I'm sure he intended that scene to mean just what it looked like. You know, "I'm screwing the earth." Well, what an interesting phrase. Although it wasn't that. I mean, it's actually much more earthy, and I think part of it was intended to mean a kind of, that the earth is this woman that I'm with as well, because surely the Olmo character felt that. So I invite you sometime to look on the internet. You can see this clip for yourself. It's an amazing scene, and I was astounded when I saw it. I was standing in a long line in the city of Paris to see part 1 of this film. And people came out from the first showing, and they did everything they could to dissuade everyone from going in. I remember one guy saying, "Novecento è merda," you know, just like that. They just thought it was, because most people thought it was an awful movie. It has its good parts, though, and this was one of them. That's all I'm going to say for now.
For me, the most successful part of the film was that the parts that showed that dirt was this metaphor for everything. And when you start considering everything, when you have this all-encompassing perspective on the problems of the world, environmentalism becomes very important. It becomes clear that it's the story of the century. And so the question for me then is, why isn't it the story of the century? You know, it's still, you know, you have your science section of the New York Times, and that's really where these stories land. And every once in a while, there'll be something that's truly exceptional or curious that makes it to the front page. And I have a theory about this. I happen to be working on this book, so everything funnels back to my theories, and I'd love to hear what people think of this. But I think that just about every debate currently underway over science, health, and the environment has formed around a single grain of philosophical opposition, where there's one side, and sometimes these sides are in our own heads. It's not necessarily one group of people against another. There's one side that believes that nature is dangerous and humanity is perfectible, and the other side that feels that nature is perfect and humanity corrupts. And the failure to recognize that this is a false opposition has led to bad policy. It's the reasons that Americans get sicker each year, even as we increase spending on healthcare. And I think it explains our paralysis in the face of environmental crisis. I'm not sure yet that this is the explanation, but it at least explains what's going on in my own head, which is where I'm trying to start, and we can move out from there. You know, my parents grew up at a time when the pendulum had really reached its apex of the swing toward rationalism. You know, it was the time of Levittown, the Green Revolution, our friend the atom, and then Levittown turned into the symbol of soulless uniformity, and the Green Revolution became Silent Spring, and our friend the atom turned into the Cold War. And so my father, you know, was leading the charge away from Blake, or away from Descartes toward Blake, away from rationalism toward romanticism in a blue VW bus named Bluebell across the country. He arrived in Berkeley and met my mother, who was then the wife of a lawyer, busy with cocktail parties and childcare and dieting. And so I'm the result of the history's momentum, which drove my mother away from the rational order toward romantic naturalism. But the thing about, you know, my point is that the romantic isn't necessarily the good thing, and this became very clear to me growing up. You know, I have a lot of sympathy for these romantic ideals because, you know, I was given them in all the books that we read every night and with my breakfast each morning. But it also became very clear that there were some hypocrisies here, and that it lacked intellectual rigor. What was natural wasn't always the best, and wasn't always healthy. And I think it became most clear to me when I was in high school, and I became convinced. I was a long-distance runner, and my mother was, her newest thing was a raw food diet, and I became convinced that this was going to fill me with energizing enzymes. When you're a long-distance runner and you run 10 miles after school every day, you have to consume a lot of calories, and when you try and do that by eating raw vegetables, you know, it's a mound of lettuce like this. And I think I actually was, just the chewing was consuming more calories than I was getting. And I began to get thinner. I was already fairly thin. We all had nicknames on the track team, and my friends weren't large themselves, but my nickname became Auschwitz. And I was losing to these people who were eating Twinkies and Lunchables. And so I think what we really need at this point is to reconcile this dualism, to realize that the natural world is not perfect, and it's not perfectible, at least with our current understanding of science. And to find ways to bring all of those important romantic values, all those things that science often doesn't measure, happiness, beauty, and awe, all the important connections that we don't fully understand yet, and bring the rigor of rationalism to them. And so that's what I try and do with my journalism. And as I began looking into this, I found that there's all these people out there that have been doing this for so long, these ecological economists who've been working on these ideas for, you know, decades, and these scientists who are trying to find ways to quantify ecosystem services, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there's a lot of hope for this, and the point that you just made, I think, is really important as well, that, you know, in making media, you face the same problem. You have to have the elan to have something compelling, and that sometimes precludes having the numbers in there, and these ways to think about new media, and to, you know, to have the movie that gets people excited, and then have the data in the internet. I think is a really promising way of going about things. So.
Okay, well, thanks, Nate. Yeah, my name's Brian Wright. I'm an agricultural economist in Giannini Hall next door. When I was growing up in Australia, I remember in first grade I was trying to learn stuff that would help me know how to manage a farm. I remember remembering how to spell wheat. There's an H in there, you've got to remember that, because there's going to be a farm, you've got to be able to spell it right. I was thinking about probably when I was 11 or 12, I'd know enough to go and do that. But I never imagined that at this age I'd be speaking to a Berkeley audience about an underground movie. But you never know. Berkeley must be, my conclusion is Berkeley must be really running out of money if they're using agricultural economists to talk about underground movies. But, so please give your donations. I'm actually here because David Silberman asked me to be here, and it's because I really have a great regard for David as an interdisciplinary person that I'm doing this. He's at the budget committee today, but the fact that he's on the committee that decides my salary has nothing to do with the fact that I'm involved in this. I thought the film was very instructive. You know, I've always wondered what those soil microbes looked like under a microscope, and now I know they're sort of little square guys with big eyes who seem to be able to march in formation, which, you know, I never knew before, but I missed some of the technical stuff because I'm not quite sure how they see under there, you know, and it must be the glowworms come next or something, but I'm getting educated, you know, I'm really doing well on this. I never really thought economists to be the people who'd be sort of entertaining for this kind of audience, but then I got this as an attachment to a memo on this meeting today. I got something from the European Commission, I think, and it starts, well, it doesn't start, but in the middle, the less exciting parts come first, but in the middle it says, prepare a common implementation strategy for the framework directive and other pillars of the strategy in partnership with the member states while maintaining an open dialogue with experts who participated in the stakeholder consultation. This will allow initiating activities to support member states in identifying and developing the most cost-effective measures to achieve the objectives of the strategy. This will also allow better cooperation between the member states in reaching comparable approaches to soil protection. And then my printer ran out of ink. So I think actually economics is pretty exciting. there are some things that I missed in the film. In Australia, we don't start with soil, we start with rock, and then in the more productive areas we have some dust too. And the dust is, you don't see the dust on the ground, you see it like everywhere. In fact, if you're driving a car behind another car, that's all you see is dust, and makes it difficult to pass the car in front. And you get it all over yourself. I remember when I was driving around Australia once, I went into a little place way out in the outback to get some meat and some bread, and everybody was kind of looking at me like aghast. And I've been driving a mini moke with open sides, and I got back and I looked in the rear view mirror and I was totally blank white all over except for my eyes. And I could see they probably thought I was a ghost out of someplace. But when I think about dirt and soil, I think about things which were captured a little bit, but I think could have been visually engaged a little bit more in the movie. I think about the big cracking clays on which we used to grow rice. When it dries out, this clay soil just cracks up into kind of almost symmetric patterns of huge cracks, which make the first irrigation pretty difficult because the water runs right out through the sides of the irrigation channels until they close up. When they close up, this soil becomes just like glue, and it will suck anything in there, and you've got this stuff that cakes you all over with about this much thickness of dirt. And on the other hand, we also had sandhills, which are red and sandy and warm. As soon as you get a rain in the summertime or in the spring, the grass will grow right away on those sandhills, and that keeps animals alive until the big heavy soils respond. It's a totally different kind of texture. It gets all over the sheep. You can tell where the sheep come from by the color of their wool. It gets all over a horse once the horse gets hot and starts to sweat. But you don't see that on the horse unless the flies take flight, and then you can see the dust underneath, which is on top of the horse. But most of the time the flies are there, so that's what you see. When I travelled around to other places, I saw other kinds of soil or environments, starting with, say, the Sinai, where you just see these big rocks that look like they've just been dropped from heaven, and they're bare with no sign of life at all. But you see other places too, like New Guinea. I saw hillside terraces where they were growing sweet potatoes, and I found out later they've been growing them a lot longer than people realized at that time. And the amazing thing is the women till the soil with sticks, and they make trenches which are absolutely rectangular, that go straight down the hillsides. And I have no idea how that works, but it's apparently worked for about 20 or 30,000 years. So I guess they know something I don't. And it'd be nice to kind of get those images of those different kinds of soils. And two other images stuck in my mind. One is the terraced hillsides above Amalfi in Italy, which have been tilled for at least 2,000 or 3,000 years. That looks to me like sustainable agriculture, which didn't just meld in with the environment, but actually created it. We've got the terracing making farming possible for long periods. And I went to, I think it's called the Farm Progress Show in Iowa a couple of years ago, and they were demonstrating huge farming equipment and turning over the soil with these tractors. And that soil there was something I'd never really ever seen in my life. It looked more like fruitcake. It was so beautiful with all this organic matter and so deep and pure. You don't see that in Australia almost anywhere. Our soil is about 1/8 of an inch thick most of the time in the good areas. In the bad areas, there's none at all. But that brings me to something I would have liked to have seen in the movie more than I saw. I saw a lot of people who looked like the people on our panel talking about their love of the soil, but I think I would have liked to see more from farmers who actually make a living doing this and do a very good job of it. And I think that maybe places like this don't give enough credit to farmers who really do know, they work with the soil, they know how to improve it, they have improved it a lot over the years in the best cases. I think it would have been nice to have heard from some of them, as well as from people from the social sciences commenting on their love of the soil. And I think this, I agree with Nate's point of view that we need to kind of meld different points of view, maybe a little better. I've been astonished in my own students' responses, and so have some other people, to things like the Green Revolution, that they're almost, even though I don't teach them this, they almost uniformly think that it's some kind of environmental disaster, and it's just being connected to Silent Spring, which I don't know that really that connection is all that strong, but I do know that I've been just finished writing a report on the food crisis for the World Bank, and I think without the Green Revolution, somebody would have been running this thing a lot earlier than now, and you would have had much worse environmental problems. One more thing, coming from Australia, when I was growing up, I thought that all of the environmental problems in Australia were basically due to bad care of the land and by farmers like my family and others. But now we know a lot more. We know that the degradation of Australia happened a lot earlier, and a lot of it is probably due to the dynamics of climate change, and some of it's probably due to the way the Aboriginals used fire to control the environment. We know that a lot of those deserts in Australia once were lush and now have nothing growing at all. I think we should be a little bit more humble about how much of the change in the environment is due to us and how much is due to other factors we can't control. And we basically just have to make accommodations that keep civilization going in ways that are as sustainable as possible. But so that's maybe a little bit more than you could expect from a movie like this. But they asked me to sub for David Zilberman, and that's about the best I can get, except that I've got one other suggestion. Coming from Australia, we have racetracks that are made of turf, and we have some golf courses that are made of dirt. Okay, in America you have racetracks that are made of dirt and golf courses that are made of turf. So I figure you should become like Australia, because there's a lot more golf courses and racetracks, and the horses really need that soft turf to stop breaking their legs, as we found out recently. On the other hand, golf balls don't need soft surfaces at all, so why don't you do a switch and have all the golf courses be made of dirt and the racetracks be made of turf? And that's my one scientific piece of advice for the community today.
Let me just introduce one clip. As I said, when we started out, we were trying to find the way to tell this story, and we wrestled with a whole number of issues, including how many farmers to put in, and how do you film with people who are actually doing things as opposed to simply giving their opinion, which is always a balance. But as I said, we started off with wanting to tell the story of dirt and humans from dirt's point of view, because again, going to a wider audience, we thought we would be able to shift that. So if we can play the disc off of iDisc. This is I think if you just eject it and put it back in, it'll probably. So this was one step, and part of the thinking was that this is really raising soil as an issue with a bit of a jolt, and I agree with Gary's sort of sense of urgency. Early in the process, I was asked to go down to UCSD and speak about film and media with some people at Scripps, Mark Thiemens, who Ron has worked with in the past as well, the head of the physical science department, and and then there was an undergraduate course, a graduate course at Scripps, and then a lunch with some of the people working there. This was before Inconvenient Truth, and they're saying you really have to do something on climate change. And I said that I knew there were 2 or 3 films in the works already, and they said because, well, it's climate change. The debate here isn't whether it's happening or whether we're having an effect on it. It's just how fast it's happening. And half the department here says it's accelerated and it's going to happen much sooner than we think. And I think we have to be raising that issue, and there's a real sense of urgency within that. That was prior to Inconvenient Truth. And the long sentence from the European Commission that you read, which is, and that's only a small part of it, because all of this paper is almost from the European Commission. In 2002, they began to focus on the centrality of soils in solving certain solutions, well, actually protecting civilizations from the consequences of climate change. And they had a number, they put out a thematic strategy for soil protection. And I was sitting, we were editing, and one day I got a call from a woman and says, could you come to Brussels and show the film? This was after Sundance. I said, well, yeah, who are you? And she says, I'm the soil person in the European Commission. I said, so the soil person? She says, yes, I'm the person responsible for all soils under several committees down in the European Commission, and there's no awareness of it here. And I always thought, well, there's more organic food, there's more awareness of the environment, particularly in Germany, and Italy has the most organic. And she said, no, and we would like to try and reach beyond the kind of document you were reading, because we talked to each other and nothing happened. So they did of this thematic strategy for soil protection, which can be accessed via the website, which I can read. But one of their major initiatives was awareness raising. There's little public awareness of the importance of soil protection. Measures to improve knowledge and exchange information and best practices are needed to fill this gap. The Commission will foster initiatives such as wide distribution of soil atlases of Europe, and they give you the portal for soil there. Continuation of European summer schools on soil survey to provide training to young researchers, encouragement of initiatives such as European Manifesto on Earth Heritage and Geodiversity, integration of soil knowledge and protection in community-funded information and training events, soil management awards where appropriate, and initiatives within the UNCCD in the Year of Deserts and Desertification. So they were addressing these, and that's fairly limited in the sense of how do we use our media tools to be able to reach that. How do you communicate? I know there's the Ecosystems Observatory, which is sort of a phenomenal concept where you finally start to bring this information together in a place. But then how do you get it out, communicate that knowledge to a wider public? And
just to make a comment when you
and this was what down at Scripps they were also wrestling with. So one of the things that I showed in sort of environmental policy was a reggae music video from Jamaica, which was sort of the most astonishing sort of musical introduction to somebody's point of view from within a slum in Jamaica, in Kingston. We're getting close. It's growing. It's viral.
Could I make a comment?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
Can you? Yeah. No. Now it's on? Yeah, good. Just to comment here that this report to which he's referring has received some scientific data support here in the latest issue of Earth Science Reviews, which I sent to Ron, in which a team of folks from the European Union is estimating the natural rate of soil erosion throughout the Union, which is an important baseline figure that one needs. And of course, you get a range. You don't get a single number. And they also have evaluated the actual rate of soil loss by erosion in the European Union. And they're trying to come up with what is a tolerable rate. This is the major way in which soil is lost from the European Union, is by erosion. Point is that, and this is very, very carefully done, is that the rate at which soil is being lost now is 10 times the natural rate of erosion. It's not 2 times or 3 times, it's 10 times. And they see this as a very, very serious problem. It is wind, it's water, they evaluate all mechanisms by which, and this can be pointed directly to agricultural practice as well as building practice.
Is that lost from land to ocean or from one place on the land to another place on the land?
That is actually evaluated, and that's an important consideration because, of course, wind, for example, can pick up soil one place and deposit it another. Obviously, water does the same thing. They see it in terms of an irreducible loss, and they're trying to come up with a tolerable figure that will then plug into this policy so that there will be goals set that will try to achieve that tolerable figure. But yeah, there are very, very important scientific issues that accompany this article and its evaluation. My only comment here is that that's a figure to work with, that we're in one part of the world at least where we know agriculture has been practiced for a long time, one sees that erosion remains a very, very serious problem.
I'll just add to Gary's comment that David Montgomery at the University of Washington recently won the MacArthur Award, and one of his areas that he's now promoting and writing books on is the impact of soil erosion and the sort of underestimated rate, well, the fact that the federal government has set a standard for erosion, it's orders of magnitude too high to sustain soil resources into the next century. So it's an issue growing in the earth sciences very quickly. I think we're finally ready now.
Okay, and so once again, one of the things that when we started talking about the film, we would say we wanted to tell the story of dirt and humans, but people really responded to our sense that, do you know dirt's alive? It's actually a living matrix. It's something that's not just dead, it's actually a living system. And that was a big leap for a lot of people. So that's why we started trying to tell it from dirt's point of view, and this was just the first experiment for that.
That's me you're looking at. I'm that mud, soil, clay, rock. Yep, I have been around for a while. And I think it's time you heard our story. The real dirt. My early years were fun. You know, lots of shallow relationships. Playing the field. A little fling here and there. Messing around. And then one day, a couple of million years ago, everything changed. It was love at first touch. Your feet, your toes, those opposable thumbs. You got what it meant to dig deep in a relationship. We shared everything. Everything. And what imagination. You made more of me than I ever thought possible. And we made magic together. Party, yeah, we partied all the time. You worshiped me. The ground you walked on. Then you pulled away. And became distant. Hey, what's going on? Ooh, that hurts. What are you doing? Can we work this out? You tell me.
So that we started with that as an approach, but you can only go so far with that. I mean, it's fun, but over the course of the length of what we wanted to do, it was really difficult. And partially we think maybe we weren't skilled enough as filmmakers, but then we also went and asked Larry Gelbart, who wrote Oh God, and he didn't think it would work either. So that's when we decided perhaps we should, go a more traditional route. But the idea of somehow conveying beyond the sense of urgency through, it's that mix of rational, romantic. It's a sense of beauty in what you want to show. And in fact, when we began at this level, at one point, we were working with Warner Brothers Animation, because the head of Warner Brothers is an environmentalist, and we were looking for a much more complicated look of soil organisms. I mean, what you see in disaster movies now and in action films, those resources, we lust after those resources to go into what do microorganisms look like in the soil. And we've even said, there are amazing looking characters with all kinds of stuff. But Warner Brothers went through its own collapse, and so that project, we kept going with the project that we had. And we added our little dirt characters who were simplified, also to get some sense of some sense of humor and some sense of attachment with an audience. This part didn't work, but you can feel with an audience when we start at the beginning with audiences, when we start talking about soil, and then all of a sudden somebody starts breaking up rocks, and then you see the little characters. You can feel an audience start to relax a little about it. It's not that they have to keep up and think about what you're telling them. That part works, but at the same time, then you want a footnote. I mean, the book I wrote, you had way too many footnotes probably, but you want to footnote almost everything that you have there, which, as Nate said, we can now do a proper job with the internet to do that. The second part that I had, part of the process is we began this film, and we did we were also going to use feature clips because they're funny and people relate to that. But we began 2.5 years, this is a 5-year plus project to this point. About 2 years in, we began to find material, feature clips, animations, all kinds of things that we should have known, we thought, right away, given that the web is out there. And so as part of it, we developed an additional asset just to see how that would work, which is what would a web portal for environmental media or eco-media look like? How might it function, given the fact that you're overwhelmed by information, and it's a niche audience. It's for people interested in media and the environment, and all media, not just films and television. So that there's a web portal that aggregates information about different forms of media and allows people with social networking tools now to be able to start sharing that and building communities. And we looked at that as we began to think about that, because as I said, the film was only the tail that we think wags the dog of a bigger, more interesting project. So we just did sort of a prototype of what that might look like. And so we set up greenscreen.org. And if we just play the beginning, I don't think we have time to play it all, but if we just say the introduction. So when you go to this was our introduction to show what it does.
It operates like a neural network, one our species can use to adapt to dramatic, even catastrophic environmental crises. But right now, that network's on overload. Doom and gloom dominates the mainstream media with an onslaught of worst-case scenarios. Overwhelmed by a tidal wave of unfiltered media, people searching for solutions often wind up defeated, wondering, what's the use? That's where the greenscreen.org comes in. Positive, solution-oriented eco-media does exist in every imaginable form. There is good news out there, and we're here to help you find it. The greenscreen.org will be the premier resource for people from all walks of life desperate to find that good news and to use it to empower themselves and others. Let's take a look at who might take advantage of the accessible information and social networking the site offers.
So we could stop there. Then there are scenarios of different users. A teacher in a high school, middle school in the Bronx. There's a chef in the Midwest who wants to cook with organic food but has no idea how to do it. There's a mother of a couple surfers down in Southern California who were covered with rashes, and she wants more information about it, and she'd heard something about it. So we had scenarios for typical users that might be able to access the site, and then also a job bank for people working in media where they can find jobs with each other and connect that way. And it was that sense of how do you begin to access these tools. And of course, since we did this a couple of years ago, we've shot so far past that with Twitters and tweaks and instant, everything, that now the killer app would be something that would allow you to start to think about solutions to soil. And your description of golf courses and racehorses shifted is like a great 1.5 minute, thing that immediately goes around if you actually just put it up and show that. And with Australians always have a great sense of humor, so there's something with it. You tell it that way, so it can, and you would put that up and share it around, and then that goes up. So that was a way of thinking about how do you share that information, because it's starting with Scripps. They said, it was Mark Thiemens who said, I've been before Congress 20 times on climate change. A number of them were in the Bush administration. He says, it's like I'm mute. I don't talk to anybody. How do I get beyond that? And that's sort of what we were looking here. So in thinking of sort of the ecosystems observatory, all this stuff's going to be gathered, but then is there another component then to begin to share that, so that when the people at the EU, I'm happy to fly to Brussels and discuss that with them, but they should be able to just go there and get this panel and whenever they want. So that's sort of the rest of the operation. And then there was how our film works. We're repurposing our website. We have a really nice website. It's cute, it's functional, and it's great, but it doesn't have the tools that allow you to do community building and go beyond that. And so just this past week, too long for my purposes, we're working with Blue States Digital, with the people that did the Obama campaign, among others. And their tools for building community and sharing information are fantastic. I mean, they've built it out now, and now they've gone to help other nonprofits to work on that. And in the same way is how then do you use this with community groups so that you are working with farmers? There are 80 million gardeners in this country, and if they're relating soil to upcoming legislation in any way and starting to write any letters, and as on the committee, as on a 50-year farm bill, as on Reaching Tom Vilsack, then you begin to start changing a sense of not only the importance of soil, the state of the critical state we're in with regard to soil, and possible solutions. So that's sort of what the overall project was, and it's a learning curve for us. In doing it, we've discovered so much about it. Who'd have thunk? As you were saying, who'd have thunk you'd be here? Who'd have thunk I'd be here in the soil science?
I think I'll let.
Yeah.
I'd like to make just throw this out to everyone, actually, to think about, including panelists. I think there's a symbolic barrier that needs to be thought about very carefully with respect to trying to promote interest in and conservation of soil that is not faced by other natural resource media. We have very romantic notions about water, for example, and the oceans and rivers and lakes and so forth, and we also do about the sky or about atmosphere and so forth, but soil doesn't have this kind of charisma. It doesn't. And think of the associations. Soil is where we bury our dead. Soil is associated with decay. You saw it in the film, in fact, where in one scene there's the litter becoming humus. It's where things that are pieces of animals or parts of plants decay and become non-functional as far as living things go. In other words, soil is associated with death and decay in the minds of most people. It's what we walk on. Hard to respect, you know, it's why it's the Rodney Dangerfield of natural media, that it's hard to respect something that you walk on. And we don't walk on water, at least not most of us anyway. And we certainly, we'd love to fly. That's part of the romantic value of the atmosphere. And the organisms that live in soil, and the worms were featured in the film, are also not charismatic. Insects are by far the largest number of species on Earth. Just try to get people interested in keeping a certain species of insect from going extinct. Aside from butterflies, maybe they're not going to listen to you. And yet you can do it for charismatic fauna such as the polar bear, for example, and so on. So there's a real barrier there in the minds of people. They're not going to come to soil thinking the way that they are, feeling the way they do about water and about air. That has to be dealt with in some fashion, it seems to me. Now, where soil has been the most successful, I think, in getting itself, let's say, saved and respected, is as a partner with plants in the food system, and perhaps also in the forest system. And that partnership goes way back. The unit here at Berkeley was called Soils and Plant Nutrition. I mean, they understood that marriage as being very, very important, because soil on its own right might or might not get respect. But soils with, and we saw it in the film as well, with the growth of plants, especially plants that are important to people, that seems to be a good tack. It's not soil, but it's soil as a medium for plant growth. And that's what, of course, James Dean was all about in that scene as well. So there could be at least a clue to something, but I think it's going to be very difficult to override that symbolic significance of soil in people's minds in order to bring it up to the level of consciousness that we have for purifying water or trying to purify, if you wish, the atmosphere and so forth.
Yes, I'll open this up to questions. I just wanted to follow on Gary's comment, and then I'll just turn it over to the audience, that in the film you have wonderful scenes of potters in India making earthen pots. And follow up on Gary's comments, though, when I was I worked with some archaeologists in Pakistan many years ago, and we watched the local potters making pottery. And they were considered the lowest caste in their community because they were working with the earth, and the local people were always shocked that the Americans would be so happy to dig in the soil and do that kind of work, because in their own community, those were the people that had the lowest socioeconomic position.
Right.
Did you run into that when you made the...
It's actually in the film, when the potter's making the pot, there's a cutaway to a woman sitting in a brightly colored dress, sort of looking, and she's got this look on her face like, what are they filming him for? Which is actually what she asked, right, because he squats down in the middle of the street. Mm-hmm. You know, the kids going around on motorcycles. In India, you get a crowd immediately, and so we had to do it pretty quickly. And we were in a place where, way off in sort of a working area, and he was the lowest of the lowest of the low. On the other hand, there was a sense there, of course, that if you're making pots for tourists and there's an income, et cetera, that's a different story. But again, it was the same kind of sense.
Okay. I'll pass this
around. I guess it's referring back a little bit to what Nathaniel said about somewhat the polarization of the feelings toward nature as either being dangerous or being perfect, and in where we find all solutions. And then also Brian saying, in some ways, people referring to the Green Revolution as being the Silent Spring or being an environmental catastrophe without looking at a lot of its impacts in terms of bringing food and enabling food production to double and save lives. And so I am a little concerned about your movie, which I loved, but nevertheless, I am concerned about it still being somewhat polarizing rather than bringing people together who are smart, who have different perspectives on how to feed 9 billion people, 10 billion people in 2030, of which the majority are from developing countries, urbanized. There'll be less farmers. There won't be a huge return to rural areas, however much we saw those wonderful youngsters going up to upstate New York. And so by having Vandana Shiva and our own Miguel Altieri, who I love, but having certain perspectives there time and time again, as well as your ecologists, but not having some other people who are very, very concerned about how we feed people, still sustainably, without poisoning the water, but it may not be all through composting. It may still, there may be a role for some other kinds of non-organic fertilizers, or there's simply access issues to that kind of compost. There's labor issues. It's so complex. And so some having, and farmers, sorry for going on, but farmers in particular can bring that up. Farmers who are perhaps some of those Midwest conventional farmers who want to transition because they're seeing soil erosion, they'd like to transition, but they're facing market obstacles, they're facing cost obstacles, and so on and so forth. They're not going to be your organic diehards. They're going to be talking honestly about the struggles and also feeling very proud about the way they're feeding people beyond their communities, perhaps. So just want to say we need portions of this movie to bring in a few other voices and get a wonderful dialogue about food security, access natural resources, energy for 9 billion people, and bring in a few other voices and get the students dialoguing and debating on this. It would be fantastic. That's my comment.
I agree with that. And in fact, and in making the film, you have choices, but you also have to, is it a traditional documentary in which is more of a television documentary where you have opposing views. You have somebody from Monsanto speaking to this, and then you have, Miguel and Vandana on the other side. In our case, we know that there are 3 films coming out. There's one film coming out, Food Inc. There are 3 films coming out on food that will be addressing that. And including World According to Monsanto, it's a French film. There are a number of films out there that are really focusing on food and soil issues, primarily on food and soil. So we wanted to sort of keep food from taking over the film, although that's what most people relate to, and show sort of the diversity of ways we treat film. Dirt for us is as important in terms of thinking about climate change in the film as it is about agriculture. And so part of it is to throw some things out there, and then with this not only on this kind of web thing, but you create that dialogue online. Oh yes, you Vandana Shiva, we've heard her whole rap. And there's a great Danish film about her arguing with some of her critics, and one of her it's called Bullshit, and there's an English version of it, but a couple Danish filmmakers. They're very pro-Vandana, but they did that. They took her into every debate she had. But our sense also was, rather than we wanted to give a voice to the people who had provocative things to say. We didn't want to put it all in the film, and we did want to. That's why I'm saying the film's the tail that wags the dog of the other project, is that's where you go. That's where you have students saying, okay, here's a lesson. Is this correct? There's a whole issue about, which Gary raised, there is a problem with dirt, and soil scientists, a lot of soil scientists do not like the word dirt. They just, Daniel Hillel, who you know, we were looking at wanting to film in Israel in terms of dealing with first Israel and then Palestine soil issues, and how actually if they don't resolve soil issues, they're not going to resolve anything. And we wanted to do some filming on that. We just didn't have the budget to do that. And the first thing, when I talked to him, he said, dirt. And he spoke to Bill Logan too. He said, dirt, you can't call anything dirt. Why are you calling it dirt? And it's one of the issues is because it sort of addresses that. It says, that which we've scorned and thought, let's think about it in a different way. And so we can only do so much in the film. We can raise certain issues. There's a balance. There's also a sense, I think, we set up, people bring to the film already the sense of a lot of the destruction, going way into crops and continuing the destruction. I think we need to make the point and go on. People have come up after festivals and said, you have, it's great, not only hope, but you've shown that there are practical solutions. And I look at the section we had in the film, which we've since changed on West Jackson and the Land Institute, and we've cut it down so much in that film. I don't even quite understand what they're doing there when I'm looking at it, because we haven't been complete to the information that comes out of that. So we've hopefully shifted that in the next version. But the next thing to do is to go on to a longer version of which is a module for a study guide on the Land Institute. And in fact, can you grow perennial crops? Is this, as he thinks, the holy grail of saving soil through agriculture that only grows perennial? There's a lot of debate that you can have about that. You know, he's a crusader. Right now he's down in Monterey crusading for soil when people are talking about food with the media. Will probably be a story too. So I agree, but for us also, we'd heard the debates, and so we wanted to give Miguel and Vandana more time, because you can come back and start arguing with that in a classroom, and it'll get people thinking about it.
Hi, my name is Eric Gimel. I used to be in the physics department here, and I got engaged actually with the issue of dirt and soils through West Jackson. I was part of a group that was giving him some grants to the Land Institute. And for somebody who came in from the physical sciences, not from ag, and had a mostly urban upbringing, it was very interesting. It's been very interesting to talk to him. And I find when I see him trying to communicate, no matter what the validity of what he's trying to say, a lot of the problems are very similar to problems I've seen with Noam Chomsky, who's, whether you like what he says or not, it's very interesting when you see him interviewed about why he's not on the news more. What he'll tell you is, I don't fit in the system of ideas that exist in the media, and so I can't say anything without spending half an hour trying to explain what I'm meaning, because the words I'm putting through don't make sense to people. And I think for a lot of people in the urban environment, soil is just not something they're aware of. They don't even know it exists. They think that farming is, that the ground is some kind of matrix and you just plug stuff in there and then food comes out. It's a very primitive sense, so I really applaud you for bringing a highlight on soil. But I wanted to add another idea I think that's really important is of soil as a kind of wealth, and it's a very important determiner of history. One of my favorite books on Africa is by a journalist named John Reeder, and he starts with the geology of Africa and kind of explains why you see a lot of why history has happened the way it has happened in Africa from the point of view of the fact that it has poor soils. And I see a lot of people working in development and so on who never really address that issue, the kind of quality of soil in different parts of the world. So, two commentaries.
Well, while we're talking, could I just put in the other DVD, which addresses exactly what, a question of urban?
I think a lot of the comments are really relevant. I really resonate with Robin's comments. I am a little surprised when Gary says that everybody despises soil, because I think if you want to find a group of people who treat soil with great respect, it's a lot of farmers I know. And if you drive through an area with a farmer, he can tell you which hillsides are acid, which hillsides are basaltic. They can tell you lots of stuff about it. They'll even call themselves dirt farmers, right? And they're not despising themselves when they do that. So I think that probably, out of the world's population, there's a hell of a lot of people who actually till the soil and don't view it as something to be despised, but something to be cared for, and something very important in their lives. I think it's urban people, like most of the population here, have a very different view. But I think if you want to get people who take it seriously, there are lots of them around, and they work with it.
I don't need a mic. Okay. Actually, I'm just curious if you could talk more about other choices or deliberations you had when it came to omissions, because you must have so much footage that you didn't or decided not to put in.
Yes. Omissions. Well, there's most of Asia, there's China, there's Japan, there's Australia. There are geographical omissions. There are omissions in terms of fully explaining the relationship of soil to health. There's about a month ago, there's an article in the New York Times about a study in Birmingham relating the ability of people to have access to soil and overcome cancer. And it was a study. There's been numerous studies in the United States on kids with asthma having no contact with soil, that there's a relationship with that. There's also a sense, I mean, yeah, there's also a sense of beauty with soil, and as you said, that my sense, and we had internal debates, was to let you have a sense of the beauty of soil, and now that I'm carrying my own personal patch, and more in a Koyaanisqatsi realm, if you will, letting the visual and the film experience. And we had to do a trade-off in terms of sort of the information and people talking, because people start talking and saying really interesting things, and then you start to reduce the amount that you just let the audience go. So there are always a number of choices. There are also choices in terms of the narrator voice, in terms of the, but at any rate. So, but those are the really the major omissions, and that sense of really, I don't think we made the feeling strong enough for dirt being alive as we set out to do, to be able to go into, once you get the sense that dirt is, as Bill and Logan in the book says, is the matrix for all life on terrestrial Earth. If you treat it that way, then thinking about it in the matrix, thinking about it in terms of feature films as the matrix, that you really have a sense that we're going in and out. And if you, I think part of the approach to breaking that sense of, ew, it's dirt, there are bugs in it, and we're going to die and wind up in it, part of changing your opinion is definitely food, because what is this? I mean, Gary put his finger on it. What is it? Why should I watch a film on dirt? I mean, that's what you have to, or why should I make one? And if there's a sense that we're actually cycling through it, it's not only that we set up, in the first one, a relationship between humans and dirt. Well, it's a relationship with our own molecular selves, if you will. We're actually going through it. Now, that's a really tough thing to get into a film, and I'm not sure we succeeded. But the question of urban dirt and people being distanced from it, we did one experiment, if we can.
I'm still working on it.
Okay.
It doesn't want to read.
All right, it doesn't. Anyway, we did a short animation about one day in the life of a dirt patch in the middle of a city. And it was primarily, yeah, if we just click on, if you right on in the middle of the iDVD, and then it'll get the right format too. So the idea for that was that could be a module of not only have we forgotten about dirt and what happens to it in the middle of a city, but you begin to start thinking about, well, nothing organic winds up in the, you know, not the cigar, not the dog, not, yeah, go ahead.
I've got to go to work. Not because this does not work, but I just got one comment. You know, as we know, we kind of live in a pop culture, and it's so like, to take Brian's concept and just kind of make it like riveting, it'd be the Tiger Woods playing on the golf course and then commenting about why this is better than green turf, or Metallica playing a song of why dirt is great at a concert.
Right.
And I hate to say, I mean, that, as you know, that kind of tracks from like Jamie Lee Curtis thing. That kind of like zip kind of gets things from science into the masses to policy, and policy to movements, and makes the whole thing kind of move ahead. But I think the movie was outstanding in getting that sort of inertia headed that way. But I would somehow get pop culture kind of in that zone.
Yeah, and well, that's the idea with some of this, and also, in fact, we were asked to take this. There's a Bonnaroo Music Festival where they wanted to show the film, and I think they are going to show the film at a couple of things. It takes place all summer. Through a number of and there's a green train that they wanted to show, which is a rock and roll train. And
because on the Bonnaroo thing, I've got 2 or 3 bands that are actually I know really well there.
Okay.
So it can help you get that kind of thing going. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. Well, there was interesting what we wanted to say, that there were healing properties of microorganisms in the soil, and in fact, it was Will Brinton, who works with compost, who's in the film, who was asked to use various mixtures in compost at military weapons testing facilities run by the Department of Defense. And he managed to clean you know, where they have practice artillery. And they used a couple mixtures of microorganisms developed through compost to actually bioremediate these weapons fields. And we actually wanted to go film that, but you can't get on you can't get in these spaces to do that. But in the course of that, he had told this other farmer that there had been an experiment someplace, just the beginning of, to see if you could clean, if microorganisms could be used to clean up nuclear waste. So we put that in as a suggestion, and that's something that then you would want to hear about. Oh, where does that exist? How does that work, et cetera? So it was an extreme statement of the possible bioremedial benefits of microorganisms in the soil, and important not only for sort of food, but for beauty products. I mean, we did have the idea of having, you know, various gorgeous people coming out of mud baths at one point, but we didn't get that in time for the movie. So.
Any of the panelists like to add anything before we close?
What's our time like?
Well, we suggested we would go till 11:30. We're just a few minutes over. Okay.
I think we're...
Okay. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for attending, and just to remind you again that dirtthemovie.org website is a link to the film and all the activities associated with it. And then our own cnr.berkeley.edu site is a connection to something that Gene was alluding to, and David Warner, who left earlier, which is the colleges and our department's new direction to try to establish an ecosystem observatory to basically make connections between human activities and the ecosystem responses to it. So you can learn more about that by going to the website. But anyway, thank you for coming, and please give us a round of applause for all the panelists.